Cool. Okay. I could begin whenever. We could just ease into it. I think we should just be pretty relaxed. Not as relaxed as last time when we got drunk, but somewhere in the middle.
You just literally made me spit my drink all over my PC.
Okay, so we're back. What better time to look back over the 2019 season than just before February of the next year? I think if you recall, the beginning, just before the season sort of cracked off last year, I sat down with Sean and Jonty and Dan and set them some prediction challenges for 2019. And then I just sort of sat on it for about 7 months. But we're back. Okay, just to remind you who took part. There was me. That's not even my Twitter handle anymore. I'm going to blur that out. Sean, with his fancy new logo. Jonty. Dan from F1/E space reviews with his old logo because I didn't realise he'd changed his logo. And the audience who I did ask these questions to after I set the challenge. And guys, you will see how well you fare against about 3,000 people at once.
I forgot about that bit.
Yeah, because I didn't put it in the middle bit in the summer because I forgot. So if you're feeling confident now, just know that you've got the wisdom of crowds to beat.
This can only go well.
I don't know how much you remember about what I set you, but we started with a very simple question of how many safety cars in total will be called over the whole season? And we were talking actual physical cars, not the virtual safety cars. Let's see what you all predicted. I went very conservative with 13. Jonty went with 20. Dan, you went 21, highest of the bunch. Sean, you called for 19. And the audience went sort of more towards my era at 17. Based on watching the season, bearing in mind, I think 15 were called last year. How many do you think were called?
Well, 207 were called in Germany, weren't they? So I think Dan's got that one in the bag. It's got to be in the 20s, surely.
I was going to say high teens. Germany certainly helped.
Something about the number of safety cars is really interesting to me at the moment because I think Sean and Jonty, you both started watching early 90s and I sort of started watching late 90s. But the one thing I sort of noticed over the time, that I don't know about you, Dan, I think a little bit later, if I'm right, a little bit later on. But the thing I've noticed, when I started watching F1, red flags were called much more frequently. If there was a crash, a big one, especially on lap 1, it would just be stop the race, clear everything up, start the race again in a bit. And then we moved towards the safety car era. And now we're sort of moving towards virtual safety cars a lot more. I'll tell you the answer. 17.
Oh.
I think that's partly...
Oh, that's nearly me.
That is nearly you.
That's nearly right.
So Sean,
that's 1 point.
And the audience both get 1 point for being close-ish. But yeah,
I've always liked your audience.
It is a lot less than I thought, because I was thinking it was going to be sort of 20s area. But I think because we dip in and out of these very short virtual safety car periods, it feels like, the race gets controlled more often than it does. I'll be interested to see what happens next year and the year after that, and see if this becomes a trend.
So before anyone gets smart in the comments, I wasn't around for the first safety car use.
God, when was that? It's not as late as...
73.
Okay, just 17 races for that. Simple opening question. And then I asked you, what percentage of all of the points will the top 3 teams bag? I'll tell you what you guessed. I went at 72. This is all fairly close. Sean, you went at 74. Jonty, you were the most, let's say, optimistic at 65. Dan, you went high at 79, and the audience sort of went in the middle at 72. I think the dominance of the top 3 was a continuing talking point throughout 2019. Jonty, were you just in an optimistic mood, or did you really think it was going to start getting better this 2019?
Yeah, I was really, really optimistic, but I was hoping there was going to be more. I think we were all expecting a lot more from Williams and Paddy Lowe, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, that is very true. We'll see more of them later. Actually, I think part of the big story of 2019 that was sort of went under the radar a little bit was the drop-off of the midfield, which had quite a strong few years.
Yeah, I mean, was it a huge drop-off? I think the problem was that I came into... So we did all the testing streams, didn't we? And I came into the season thinking no, the midfield aren't going to be challenging for wins and podiums regularly, but I thought they'd be a lot closer than they were. It felt like that. I think that was the biggest disappointment for me this year, was that they weren't really as close as they could have been, or I expected them to be.
I think Alpha stung me a bit as well.
Yeah.
The progression of Alpha in 2018 from fighting to not be last to fighting for Q3 every race, and then they didn't carry it on for 2019, which is really annoying.
I think similarly for Racing Point as well, they weren't quite as strong as we sort of had expected them to be. Though McLaren made up for that. And,
and the less said about Renault, probably the better, really.
Yeah. Dan, if you had to guess, where do you think it's going to fall?
I'd like to say it's in the 70s somewhere, but I think it might be 84, 85, something like that. I really expect, when I did my predictions, I really thought Red Bull Honda might struggle, and I thought Renault might be that team that bridges the gap, but it really just didn't come to fruition.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, Red Bull were a lot stronger than we thought as well, so that bridging of the gap never materialised. Well, I can tell you the answer. Out of 2,140 points, the top three bagged 1,660, which is 77.6. So not as bad as you thought, Dan.
No, not too bad.
And it gives you a point as well for being
even better.
Yeah, so it was at the high end of our predictions, which is why you, Dan, have now got a point, which means
another recurring theme here. Germany helped a lot.
Yeah, Germany was the wild card of this whole thing, and we'll see that a few times during these answers.
And Brazil.
Yeah, but Brazil's like a known wild card. Okay, so it's just you and me, John T, with no points so far. So let's move on to the next question quickly. In which I asked, name every driver that will step onto the podium. And this is when you're going to start ruining the point scheme of gaining a point for every correct answer and losing a point for every wrong answer.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you later.
I'm going to tell you the answers up front. Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen, Vettel, Leclerc, Gasly, Sainz, and Kvyat all steps on the podium. That's 8 people, which I think is one more than last year, or even the year before now that we're in 2020. I predicted Hamilton, Bottas, Vettel, Leclerc, Verstappen, Gasly, as well as Ricciardo, Stroll, Perez, and Magnussen. And those top 6 obviously all steps on the podium. But those other 4 were wrong. So 6 right, 4 wrong, 2 points. Sean, you predicted the same top 6 and also predicted 4 wrong answers in Ricciardo, Stroll, Perez, and Raikkonen. So 6 wrong, 6 right, 4 wrong.
Sake.
Again, we're going to see this theme of Force India and Alpha letting you down over and over again. All of us. That's a positive 2 for you. Now, John T. You predicted that classic top 6, but also Hulkenberg, Perez, Stroll, Magnussen, Raikkonen, and Kubica.
I know.
None of whom, unfortunately, stood on the podium. So that's 6 right, 6 wrong, which is an even 0.
Are you ruining Germany then, John T? Hulkenberg's so close.
Oh,
the swine.
That was ridiculous.
Now, your conservatism, Dan, is going to pay off here because you got that same top 6, but only predicted Ricciardo, who didn't finish on the podium. But 6 right, 1 wrong gives you 5 points.
See, I thought I was being a bit brave at the time, predicting Renault on the podium. And then when I saw Kubica, I thought, yeah, maybe I was a bit conservative.
But did we all get Gasly right, really?
Yeah, he didn't appear at all.
Because it wasn't in a...
I think the less said right now about the whole Red Bull, Gasly, Toro Rosso thing, the better. That's an argument for another day, and I don't want to get drunk on this stream.
It did make my spreadsheet a lot more difficult that happened. Right, so the way the audience works is I will list them in order and give them as many drivers as there were on the podium. So 8 drivers finished on the podium, so I can list their top 8 drivers. Vettel was their number 1 choice. But they again predicted the top 6 and also Ricciardo and Perez. So that's 6 right, 2 wrong. So they get +4. And after that, Dan, you're still in the lead with 6 points. The audience is now right behind you with 5 points. Sean's on 3, I'm on 2. John T, you're yet to get off the mark, but your optimism is cheering me up a lot.
Everyone would have loved it if it had come true. Come on.
Oh yeah, I mean you're living the dream reality here through your predictions. Next question I asked you. Which driver would have the largest increase in points by percent from the last 10 races compared to the first 10 races? So in doing this, you actually don't include Germany. So Kubica's single point didn't even come into play. Let's have a look at what you predicted. So I went with Giovinazzi. Sean, I remember, misunderstood the question and went Hamilton.
Leave me alone.
John T went with Raikkonen, Dan with Albon, and the audience also went with Giovinazzi.
Oh, Dan's played a blinder here.
I don't think so. Mate.
So what do you think? What are you thinking, Dan?
It's got to be Gio, because he scored 1 point, was it, in the first half of the year, then got P5 in Brazil. So surely, just by default, he's going to have a massive percentage increase.
Albon only scored a couple, though, before he went to Red Bull. He hadn't picked up many.
I mean,
I don't know.
But Hamilton scored some points.
Yeah, he did. Have I won it? Have I done it? Should we just move on to the next one? Fantastic.
Let's have a little look at what the top three were in this category. So third was Perez, who increased by 200%, going from 13 to 39 points. Second was Albon, who had a 1,000% points increase by going from 7 to 77 points. But you're right, Gio got a 1,200% points increase, going from 1 to 13. Yeah, you've got it bang on, Dan. But if Gio hadn't had such a sort of unbalanced season, that switch from Albon would have absolutely played into your hands perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw him get that P5 in Brazil, I did this was the one question I thought, I've done well picking Albon. And I thought, that cheeky chain bear, how's he done that then?
So those points go to me. And I also see the logic of John T thinking that Raikkonen would go to Alpha and, use his wisdom to improve things as the season went on. I'm assuming that's what happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, Alpha in 2018 were incredible how they advanced, and then 2019 they just didn't at all.
Having said that, his teammate did rather well. So right,
silly, crazy race.
Okay, so 2 points go to me and the audience, which puts the audience into the lead ahead of Dan with 7 points to 6. I'm on 4, Sean's on 3. John T, it's any second now. I can't remember which question it happens, but
I know there's 2 I've got wrong.
All right, let's move on. Driver of the day. I don't know how you've been keeping track of this, but I asked which driver would get the most official driver of the day victories. I went with Leclerc, Sean Verstappen, John T Verstappen. Dan, you went Raikkonen, and the audience also went Verstappen. Quite controversially, last year Verstappen was just mopping them up no matter what he did. Do you have any idea of how well this has gone?
I feel quite confident, but I haven't been keeping track.
Well, I'm pretty sure he got a big fat 0. So on that basis, I don't think I've got this one.
Let's have a little look. So third place was Vettel with 3. Second place, Leclerc with 4. But once again, the Orange Army has voted with 7 drivers of the day for Verstappen. Though he did have a very good year, you have to admit.
I was just going to say, to be fair, this year he probably deserved a lot of the ones he got rather than it just been a fan vote, although I think it probably is still a popularity contest. But
well, let's not forget Hulkenberg also got one of those driver of the days.
That's true. And Kubica, was it this year that Kubica got one but then didn't because it was a mistake, a glitch somewhere?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not in the official list. Lando got 2, Albon got 2, Bottas got 2, and Hulkenberg got the pity one at the end there.
Hamilton didn't get any. Wow.
I wonder why.
This is
he's a popular guy, isn't he, among the fan base?
Yeah. Absolutely non-controversial at all. So a couple of points go to Sean, John T, and to the audience. John T, you're off the mark.
John T.
But the audience is starting to pull away now with 9 points. And then 6 for Dan, 5 for Sean, 4 for me, 2 for Jonty. This is it now. This is your Giovinazzi moment, Jonty.
Fight back begins, yeah?
Yeah, you're going to have a 1,200% increase from here on out. This one, interesting. I asked you which drivers would be leaving at the end of the year, or at least by the end of the year. Again, you got the 1 point for every correct answer, 1 point for every wrong answer system. A lot of us did not think Bottas and Grosjean would be around, but okay, so I went Bottas, Kvyat, and Grosjean. Sean, you went Bottas, Grosjean, and Raikkonen. Jonty, you went Bottas, Perez, Hulkenberg. Dan, you sort of went conservative with Kvyat and Kubica, and the audience went with Kvyat and Bottas, and as we know, only Kubica and Hulkenberg left. This is a bit of, I'm trying to think of a polite, monetizable way of saying an S show.
Cluster.
Thanks, Sean. You can't beep afterwards. Okay. So I got all mine wrong. I got 3 wrong. That's -3. Sean, you got 3 wrong. That's -3. Jonty, you got 2 wrong and 1 right. So that's only -1. Dan, you got 1 wrong, 1 right. That's 0. And the audience got 2 wrong. So we were not good at this at all. But I think we are surprised that Grosjean is still here.
That's got to be worth 5 points, hasn't it? Surely Grosjean should have gone and is as good as checked out. So why not?
In our hearts, he is gone, apart from you, Dan. Looking back, I'm kind of surprised at how much we thought Bottas was going to go. 4 of us, including the audience, had him out the door.
Yeah, but based on the second half of the season, again, this is a fair comment.
How long do you see Bottas staying in F1 now?
As the F1 word, who apparently has an agenda against Valtteri Bottas, I probably shouldn't say too much. Based on his 2018, I think we were all pretty reasonable to say that he'd be in the firing line, but he proved us all wrong certainly that first half of the season. I think, although, as John said there, it wasn't amazing in the second half, he was definitely better than he usually is in the second half of the season. But I think let's not get too into it, but with the contracts being confirmed for Leclerc and Verstappen, I think he's probably fairly safe for 21.
But you don't see him signing a 6-year deal with Mercedes the way that Leclerc and Verstappen have done.
I think Hamilton will do 2 to 4 years, but I think Bottas is going to be, unfortunately for him, and I think this could be quite detrimental to his form, I think he's going to be one of those that just always gets a 1-year deal and keep their options open.
A Lacey Mark II.
Or Sainz. Look at the difference when Sainz got his couple of years at McLaren, how much better he was when he was settled, and if they did that to Bottas, who knows?
That is true. Jonty, what do you see with Red Bull and Ferrari signing up their future hotshots for the next few years and Mercedes kind of living shorter term contracts? How do you see them fighting Verstappen and Leclerc as we go into the 20s?
Ooh, that's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, like you say, Ferrari and Red Bull have quite clearly laid their cards out on the table. This is our plan. We are surging forward with these two in particular. Mercedes not signing up to anything just yet. Does that say anything about Hamilton's intentions? Just beat the records and go? Or I don't know. I think there is some concern about them staying in the long term. I mean, I hope they don't. I hope that the other teams bring the fight to them. But if the other teams don't, I wouldn't mind.
I'll round up the points for this one. Lots of losses across the board. 3 lost for me, 3 lost for Sean, 1 lost for Jonty. Dan keeps it even and the audience loses 2, which means Dan sort of, in a backwards way, claws his way back towards the audience. 1 point behind, whereas Sean and me and Jonty have fallen back to 2 and 1 point.
It's going well, isn't it, this? Really well.
I mean, I feel like
I'm only joint last.
The 3 of us, like, our average viewing time of Formula 1 is quite a bit longer than perhaps the average viewing time of Dan and the audience. So I guess wisdom does not come with sticking around. Quite a prescient image I put here when I set this up. Which race will have the most retirements? And you get 2 points if you get it right. Baku was chosen by me and Sean and the audience. Jonty went for Belgium. Dan went for Monaco. Yeah, I think we all know what the answer is. Australia, Bahrain, and Britain got 3. Russia got 5 retirements, but nothing was beating the 6 retirements from Germany, which is actually a lower number than I thought it was. Unfortunately, that's no points for anyone. I'm beginning to like Germany.
Not this year, you're not.
We had 2 quite thrilling and twisty races the last 2 years, but yeah, you're right. Yeah, this year we're not necessarily gonna. Yeah. There's not really much to say about this. I think we sort of covered it in the mid-season wrap up review thing. And the scores didn't change, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide, in which I asked, which driver will gain the most positions from light to flag in total across the whole season? I don't know if you guys have a feel for this. I think this is one of the hardest ones to have a feel for, even having watched the whole season. I'll tell you what we all guessed. 3 of us went with Verstappen. That's me, Sean, and the audience. I think, looking back, that's based on the idea that Red Bull Honda would struggle, but Verstappen would kind of make it up in the race. Jonty put his Kubica card in again. Which actually, in a theory, wasn't a bad shout, because if anything, Williams were pretty bulletproof and we're still there at the end. And Dan, you went with Stroll.
Well, bless him, he's not very good at qualifying. So I thought if he's qualifying a bit far down and that racing point is quite nifty, he should be all right.
Yeah, well, let's see if the racing point was as nifty as you hoped, because it certainly wasn't as nifty as they hoped. Third in this category was Kvyat with a bracket that I forgot to close, which means that the rest of this presentation is going to be inside that bracket. Kvyat gained 60 places over the course of the season. Stroll gained 64, but in the lead was Perez, who gained 66.
Oh, that's close.
So actually, your logic was pretty good, Dan.
It was a fair shout from Dan, because 2018, I think it was, Stroll had the record for the most places gained on lap 1 throughout the season.
Oh, is that right?
I think he's topped that percentage again this for 2019 as well. I think he topped most positions off it, because we've said before, haven't we, Jonty, on our live stream about how well he manages cold tyres, and that's why maybe he's so good in the wet and on those first laps.
Yeah, that was the reason. I remember now.
Oh, he was probably one of the only drivers then hoping that tyre blankets would continue to be banned.
There you go. That is how Lance Stroll will be a world champion.
So none of us get any points for that, but I'll give Dan a high five for logicking his way. He's just got pipped by his teammate there. In what is going to be a little bit of a theme, no spoilers, none of us scored any points again, proving that F1 is not as predictable as some people complain that it is.
So we're all as bad as George Russell then at the minute.
Quite. This next question I'll cover very, very quickly, because we did talk about it before in the sort of mid-season video, but we discussed which teams would launch with different liveries, and I think we all agreed that it was basically just Haas and Williams. Everyone else just sort of marched on, even if they added a bit of blue to their existing run-up, which means I get 0 points because I got 2 right, 2 wrong. Sean, you predicted Haas, Williams, and Alpha, which means you got 2 right and 1 wrong. Jonty, again, just throwing names at his answer. Went
Everybody.
Haas, McLaren, Williams, Racing Point, Alpha. I'm pretty sure he originally said Kubica, but I wouldn't allow him to have a person. So that's 2 right and 3 wrong, which is a -1. Dan, again, erring on the conservative side, Haas, Williams, and Racing Point. So he'll get 1 point just for the point that Racing Point knocks off. The way the audience vote worked here is I just counted ones that were extremely popular and not the ones that weren't, and they got it bang on with Haas and Williams. So they get 2 points, which brings them further away from Dan and in the lead with 9 points there. Next, I asked you, and we've covered this as well, about what Alonso would conquest across 2019. I'll just very briefly go over the points here because Jonty just went all in, as is his way. So Alonso won Daytona, Le Mans, and WEC, and we basically all end up with the same points because all of us went Le Mans and WEC except for Jonty, who went for the other two as well. Which means we all scored 2 points. We're all winners, except for the
Duffed it
audience.
on bump day.
Yeah. Was that him? Was that McLaren?
I think it was both, to be honest.
That's true. There was a lot of arrogance flying around there, but that's a shame. The audience actually lost a point to the rest of us here because they did not go for Daytona, which means we are very slowly moving our way back towards them. But Dan is only a point away. It's 10 to the audience, 9 to Dan, 5 to Sean, 3 to me, and 2 to Jonty at the moment. So a little bit of controversy here, but I've made a decision with who we're considering to be Rookie of the Year. Because there were kind of two quote marks official answers, but I'll tell you what we predicted first. I went with Russell, Sean and Jonty went Gio, and the audience and Dan went with Norris. Now, Dan, I've already made the slide, so you can't argue. But the FIA went with Albon. He's the official Rookie of the Year. But F1 also did a poll in which the fans went Lando Norris quite overwhelmingly. But I'm going with the official FIA because there was a trophy and an award ceremony, and he was in a tuxedo and everything. And also...
Wow. I mean, I'm disappointed, but think about the audience as well. They also went with Norris. So you're not just mugging me off, you're mugging the audience off as well. Yeah, I mean, I am disappointed, but I'll let it slide this time.
It'd be interesting to see, like, if we could get a bit more... I don't know if it would never be allowed, but a bit more data from Russell, because I reckon that we'd all have a very different opinion of him, or people would, if we knew exactly how well he was driving that Williams, because you could put anyone in that car and they'd be nowhere. So how good has he done in that first season? You know, just he hasn't scored a point in the Williams, he's had a crap season. It's just he wasn't there in Germany to pick up that point, and that's all.
I think the other reason that it's reasonable to go with Albon is that it just, in fairness, you know, this is all hindsight. None of us picked Albon. None of us went that way.
Considering he drove two cars and did brilliantly well in both, you can't say he wasn't.
And didn't know he was driving for Toro Rosso until Christmas,
yeah.
Basically before.
So to do what he did, I think was really, really impressive. It doesn't help any of us get any points, I'm afraid. So once again, the points remain stagnant. I'll move it on. Again, this one we've covered. We talked about which team would come out with testing looking the strongest. The answer was Ferrari, which gave 2 points to me and to Dan, and also, unfortunately, to the audience. I mean, I do love you, audience, but you're beginning to get on my tits a little bit. So they stay in the lead with 12 points. Dan behind on 11. We're seeing a bit of field spread here in the way that we've gotten used to in Formula One. So I was on testing streams with you, Sean. We spent a lot of time talking about how excited we were for Ferrari bouncing back because they were so strong. Pretty well, yeah. Okay, I'll move quickly on from this one because we have talked about that before. Another question in which optimism came back to bite us. I asked you which race the driver's title we won. No one predicted any more pessimistically than Brazil. With me and Jonty and Dan going Abu Dhabi and Sean in the audience hoping it would be a little bit earlier in Brazil. But it wasn't the USA, which I had to look up. I thought really hard about it, and I wasn't entirely sure if it was the USA or if it was Mexico, because I couldn't even remember which order the races are in because they keep moving them around. Anyway, yeah, USA, no points again. I really hope the season wraps up a little bit later on in 2020. Are you surprised that it sort of ended up being another dominant affair from Hamilton?
Yeah, I think so. Especially because the second half of the season, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I think I went into almost every weekend not really knowing who was going to win. I think the Mercedes, the Ferrari and the Red Bull pretty much all had at least a shot each weekend, which I thought was fantastic. And I think actually going into this year, 2020, I really hope that continues. So, yeah, I was surprised the USA, he won it so early on. But hey, I mean, Lewis Hamilton and the Mercedes, I shouldn't really be that surprised.
To be fair, I think a big part of the problem for 2019 was the fact that Red Bull were better, but not by enough. So all they ended up doing was taking points off Ferrari, allowing Mercedes to run away even quicker.
Yeah, that's a very fair point. And I think similarly as well with the drivers, while Hamilton was like a constant force that the second person to show up was often not the same person race on race. I don't think you can say, even in the way that it was last year with Vettel, that Hamilton had a particular title contender.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, even though Bottas finished second, you're not going to look back in 2019 and think this was the year Bottas challenged Hamilton for the title. Whereas last year, even though Hamilton won it similarly early on, Vettel was the title contesting for that. At this point, looking forward, I don't think it's that clear who will be that challenger next year.
No, you're right. It's hard to tell, but it's increasingly looking like Verstappen.
I think Verstappen and Leclerc are more likely, certainly, than Albon and probably Vettel. Although I've got to be honest, fanboy alert probably, but I'd kind of love Vettel to bounce back this year and just shut us all up.
Yeah, I can't not agree with that. As much as I kind of agree that he's gone a little bit off the boil at times, I don't like the cloud that's come over his status within Formula One, which is, pretty mega, and people seem to have forgotten that. Okay, so I asked, which team will come last in the constructors' standing and with how many points? Let me remind you what we all voted. I went Williams with 18 points. Sean, you went Williams with 15 points. Jonty and Dan both went Toro Rosso with 12 points. And the audience went Williams with 13 points. To get the points, I sort of took their mean, I want to say. While most of us were on the right track with Williams, I don't think any of us predicted how bad a year they were going to have. You didn't even predict Williams, Dan, so how surprised are you right now?
I mean, I'm surprised not only did I not pick Williams, but Toro Rosso got 2 podiums. So I think me and Jonty really did. And also, what's a bigger surprise is Jonty didn't pick Williams. Almost every other time he's gone with Williams and Kubica.
I think we were on the same page, just assuming that with Red Bull's desperate push that first year using Honda, that Toro Rosso were just going to be a sacrificial lamb the whole year. And it just didn't pan out at all. Honda proved far more reliable than we expected.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. But again, Sean, we didn't foresee just the 1 point for Williams, and that coming at a time when everyone else essentially crashed into the wall.
I didn't expect, obviously, when we did these predictions for them to have such a terrible season, but when we did that first testing stream and they were late, at that point my thought was, this is not going to be good. A little bit concerned they might be struggling this year. I don't want to get too into that, but they're launching their 2020 livery on their 2019 car and only releasing renders. That rings a few alarm bells, but we'll see. Let's be optimistic.
Because a lot of teams launch liveries and renders and such these days, much to our frustration, but that's becoming much more the way of things. You can't always dangle a car out on a train and have the Spice Girls.
You so should, though.
You so should.
Not just at F1 launches, just like when you go to Tesco, anything like that.
All right, points-wise, it's 2 points apiece for me and Sean and the audience, which sends the audience soaring off to 14 points with Dan behind 11. Sean and I neck and neck at 7. Jonty, you're still on 2, but I feel like your faith in Williams and Kubica will out at some point. Next question, which ended up being quite an interesting one, was about engine suppliers, and I asked which engine supplier will score the greatest average points. So that's total points divided by how many teams they supply. I'll tell you what we predicted. I went with Ferrari. Sean, you went with Ferrari. Jonty, you went with Ferrari. Dan, you went with Mercedes. The audience has gone with something that isn't coming up. And I'll just see what happens when I start pressing buttons. Do you guys have any feel for this? I know this Ferrari optimism came from the testing.
I kind of wish I'd gone with Honda. That's with a lot of hindsight, though, obviously, but I kind of wish I had 2 teams. They did very well, both teams.
Yeah, you see, I was never going to pick Mercedes. Well, I probably should have, because of my faith in Williams. That was always going to be the struggle. I think Alfa and Haas may have let us.
Oh, Haas have. Oh, shocker.
Well, I'll reveal the results. I'm not entirely sure at which point the audience's answer is going to come up, but we'll see how it goes. There you go, Ferrari. Okay, so in last place, Renault with 118 points per team. Ferrari next with 196 points per team. Second is Honda with 251, just behind Mercedes with 271. So it was a close run thing. And, as Jonty's been talking about with Red Bull and Toro Rosso, that Honda deal really came dividends more than we thought it would. So he still would have not won if you'd said Honda, Sean, but you would have more respect.
Is that like nice? That must say a lot about Mercedes' domination in the constructors this year, then, because Williams scored 1.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's yeah.
This is just Grosjean getting his revenge on us three for having to go it down all the time.
I think this is definitely something to think about if you start thinking towards next year, if we ask the same question again, because I got a feeling Honda could take that.
Well, Renault think they're quicker than Mercedes, or they've got a better power unit than Mercedes in terms of electrical power anyway. So, you know, they might surprise. We might see Esteban Ocon world champion.
So again, only Dan gets points, which puts him within a hair of the audience. At this point, you know, bearing in mind the rest of us are not doing as great, do you think Dan's going to take this audience?
Well, I've got to back the audience, haven't I, really? No offence, Dan, but, you know,
right.
If this is really Grosjean out to get us in some kind of dodgy conspiracy.
No, I know there's a question at the end that's going to stuff him up.
But by the way, I did remove one question, which just ended up being a farce, which was the open-ended question, because it just amounted to nothing and was more confusing than necessary.
You mean the one I got right?
What? You didn't get that right? The one where you predicted something that apparently already happened.
Yeah, which I then changed to something else completely random that did get announced, or
Oh
at
my
least
God.
proposed.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, we'll have to discuss that, because I completely cut it out, because I had to look at that slide and thought, this is a joke. Well, I might as well do it now. The slide doesn't exist. What did you predict? I've forgotten this.
But I'd originally said 3D cameras, but they'd already been trying them out at Singapore. So I said LED displays of like pit times or position numbers, and someone's proposed that to go on the new wheel cover.
You're right, they did. It's allowed, because it was allowed in the rules, wasn't it? To do that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I hope they do.
Oh my
Regardless of the question, I hope they do, because it'll look awesome.
Okay, well, I'll have to look up how many points that was worth, and then we can have a fight about it later. Once the score sheet comes up. Which, John, you could still win. You could still win without that. You know, don't count your horses. Don't count your horses, that famous phrase. Oh, God. Okay, I'm ready for this season. Okay, Quali dominance. Which driver will out-qualify their teammate the most over the whole year? I think we all know the answer to that. But you get 2 points for the correct driver, 2 points for the correct ratio. I went Hamilton, 15-6. Sean, you went with Perez. Kvyat. No, John T, you went with Kvyat. And Dan went with the audience with Verstappen. I think we're all well aware everybody's wrong. Because Russell did a clean sweep on Kubica, which is why he should have been Rookie of the Year and I should have 2 more points. But I'm not going to... It's hard to know if that's surprising or not, because we had no handle on how good Kubica was going to be on his return. We had no particular idea how bad the Williams was going to be, so they were essentially just going to be competing with each other on the back row. But 21-0 is not something you see very often. Didn't Alonso do that to...
Shut up!
But that's... But even then, that was just the 20, right?
Yeah. There you go. Stoffel better than Kubica. Confirmed.
Yeah, Van Dorn would have got that last one.
You anyway. I thought Russell would beat Kubica, but I think 21-0. I didn't expect that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I've chatted with a few people on Twitter about this and saying we've come to the conclusion we kind of wish he had never come back now. It's soiled the reputation he did have from before a little bit.
Were you alive when Kubica was racing last time, Dan?
Yeah, he was my first favourite driver actually.
Oh, nice.
In Formula One. Yeah, I was a Kubica fanboy back in the day, and I kind of agree with Jonty a little bit. I kind of wish the comeback didn't happen, but then we were all so excited at the beginning of the year, so it's mixed feelings really.
When you watch the trailer to Rise of Skywalker, and then when you see it,
Haven't seen it.
well, imagine Kubica but in space.
Well, that's an image. That's a fabulous image.
No, actually, I ended up making it sound really cool, didn't I? It's not, yeah. Less said about that, the better.
Bit harsh, given the one of the ongoing themes in Star Wars. To be fair,
That's. I'll leave it at that. My God. Okay. No points for anyone. Moving on. Now, I called this one the Formula 1.5 champion, but it's not really because that actual subreddit uses different rules. But I did ask which driver not from Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull will score the most championship points. And I had to think about this, and I excluded Albon and Kvyat. Not Kvyat. Kvyat's still there. Gasly. Because they got to spend some time in that Red Bull. There's a bit of a theme here. 4 of us went for Ricciardo, except Jonty, who went for Perez.
But he's always there, isn't he? He's always there, getting points somewhere or another.
Well, we all know what the answer is. It ended up being Carlos Sainz. He came in above both Perez and Ricciardo to claim top spot with 96 points, which was almost double what either of them scored. I think we're all a bit down and kind of worried about where he would end up and if this is going to be the end of his sort of arc. But now everyone's on this Sainz resurgence party train. I'm not good at metaphors. Sean, do you see this being the beginning of a Sainz renaissance and possibly the move towards something great?
You might need to give me a minute.
Are you not on the party train, Sean?
It was John T. Star Wars comment. I'm going to hell.
Dan, are you on the party train?
I've forgotten the question, if I'm honest. Science. It was science. That's what it was.
Science. Is
Yes,
this beginning of big things for
I'm
science?
with you. Yes, I think so. Yeah, I kind of wonder what kind of effect just leaving that Red Bull family has had on him. I mean, just being able to finally just prove himself on the track, not try and constantly be under that pressure of the big daddy Red Bull team. And I think just the relationship with Lando Norris as well has been so good for both of them.
That is true.
I mean, I think most people would agree it was a big surprise, the improvements and the performances of Sainz this year. But I'm really happy for him because it seems like the old Sainz that we saw at Toro Rosso in 2017, 2016 seems like he's back, and I'm happy for him.
I can't agree more. Yeah, this is another no points scoring round. I haven't actually counted up how many times none of us score any points, but it is hilariously embarrassing. So again, yeah, the points stay as they are. Moving on to the next question. Yeah, I did ask how many races will be confirmed for 2020, and we do finally know that, even though I don't necessarily agree with the way that went. So we was a mix between 23 and 22 between us, with Sean and I going 23, and the rest of you going for 22, which is what it did end up being in the end.
Germany gone, Vietnam and Holland in. Sorry, the Netherlands.
Quite excited about Holland, though. The banking looks dramatic.
It genuinely looks great, the way they're coming on with the track.
I love how they're keeping us all up to date as well with that drone footage. Like really trying to, well, keep us up to date, basically. They both come up quite quickly as well, don't they? Vietnam and the Dutch Grand Prix.
Yeah, there's third and fifth.
And I've got loads of back-to-backs at the start of the season. I think Australia and Bahrain are back-to-back, and I think, is it China and Vietnam?
Vietnam and China, yeah.
We thought Miami was going to be a guarantee, didn't we? We thought it was done, really.
Well, they're going to keep showing us track maps of Miami until someone gets excited. Is anyone excited about Miami? I don't understand the big deal about Miami.
No. It reminds me of the... was it the New Jersey one they were going to have for the New York Grand Prix or whatever? And they were banging on about it for years, and they kept showing us these designs, and look how amazing it'll look with the New York skyline in the background. And then it just never happened. And then Formula E went, well, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
You see, I would have got more excited about the Miami race, the original planned street circuit, if it was going to be a night race. With all of those Art Deco hotels up the strip, all lit up with the neon, it would have looked absolutely incredible. But it was planned for during the day, which is stupid, and the time of year was stupid because they were planning to have it in the middle of hurricane season.
Well, you've got to keep it interesting. Street circuits are notoriously a little bit boring, so why not have a hurricane? It's not like it's any part of the car that's susceptible to wind. Okay. Just to confirm where we are with the points, Dan, you're on 16, the audience on 17. Sean, you and I are on 9 points. And Jonty's edging towards us now on 5.
Should we just go to the pub and leave Dan to finish off?
And now the kind of meta question right at the end, in which I asked who's going to win. And if you remember, much like Jonty backed Kubica, we all backed Jonty, apart from Sean, who backed Sean. And the audience who, come on, guys, backed me. Have you seen me make predictions? And once again, everyone is wrong. No one backed Dan. Dan, you are the Carlos Sainz of this group.
I'll take that.
You came out of nowhere.
The only win on this slide is that picture. That is the only win on this slide.
He's the champion of our hearts. Apart from you, Dan. But yeah, so I think this proves that not only can we not predict Formula One, we can't predict predictions about Formula One either. So we're a real great team. I'm sure there's lots of media outlets right there looking for us, ready to hire us as punters. So good job, everyone. So we're about to go to the results screen, at which point Jonty can contest that he actually won due to the question that I removed.
That was worth 12 points, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, I think it was only 5.
All right, final results. Jonty, unfortunately, you have got into the position of making the rest of us feel better. Okay, I came second to last, thinking along the same lines as Jonty, really. I didn't want to throw a party and then win everything. Sean, you came third. You also got 9 points, but I put you in third because you didn't make the quiz. So
it's also alphabetical, to be fair.
That is true. Dan, you are the winner of the humans. With 16 points, pretty much trashed the rest of us. Well done, Dan. You were beaten by the audience by just 1 point, but there were a lot of them.
I'm very happy with that. You know what? All I wanted to do was beat you boys. That's what I did. And the audience, fair play, 17. That's
quite
a naughty
score as well.
Yeah, exactly, Jonty. 5 points. I expect better from you, mate.
Oh, God, you could add my score and Jonty's score together and we still wouldn't beat you. You absolutely just stomped all over us, Dan.
Yeah, but I was a bit boring with some of mine. I think Jonty, his Hulkenberg leaving F1 prediction, that on its own deserves a medal. I don't know how we did that.
That is true. The rest of us went Bottas. Go on.
I'll just say, however, if the three of us, Stuart and Jonty, team up and make a super team, we'll destroy them all.
That is true. Audience included.
Or we'll be so far into the minuses, it's like an episode of QI.
Well, let's not go down that route. No, Dan, really, really impressed with your work. Erred on the conservative. We'll see if that continues to help you in future seasons. But yeah, the rest of us need to up our game.
Well, no, what have we learned from this exercise? Believe all of the doomsayers on Twitter and all social media saying F1's dying, F1's rubbish, dominance is going to kill the sport, because then when it doesn't, you're pleasantly surprised by the end of the year, instead of being optimistic like me and when it comes to...
And on that cheery note...